Hi there, and welcome to Dork Wars. My name is Blake, and I'm here with Grant,
Hey there.
Wesley,
What's up, dorks?
Andrew,
Howdy.
and Diedrich.
Hello.
If you guys will recall, on our first episode, the only people that were on the podcast were myself, Grant, Wesley, and Andrew, and we all talked about our connection to Star Wars, what it meant to us, how we got started in it, and now I'm going to give that opportunity to Diedrich. He was not on our first episode, if you guys will remember, due to some COVID-19 type of deals going on. But Diedrich, what is your connection to Star Wars? How'd you get into it? What is your love for Star Wars? Where did it begin? What are you into in the Star Wars stuff? So take it away, Diedrich.
Well, I've been into Star Wars since I was a kid, like I think most people who are into Star Wars. I was probably about 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there when my dad started showing me the original trilogy on VHS, which I still have sitting on my shelf. And I was just super thrilled, and I wanted to watch it all the time. I eventually inherited a whole bunch of the kind of like classical 70s, 80s toys from an older cousin, so I have quite a few of the just original, those little like stick guys who, you could barely bend their arms and legs, but I've kept the collection around, and I hope maybe one day I can pass that along to my kid. And I also remember, being young and having my dad and I fight with like the cheap lightsabers you get, at like Walmart or Target or whatever. And we'd fight in the backyard, and usually I'd lose, but as I got a little bit older, every once in a while I'd get a smack to the knee, and eventually I do the old pop the elbow, grab the other lightsaber, and just decapitate. I'm just kidding. That didn't go down that way, but maybe in my mind, that's what was going down. But I've liked Star Wars for a long time. I think I came up on it really when I started watching the prequel trilogy, kind of when I was like 10, I think was when episode 1 came out. And then pod racing, that kind of blew my mind as a 10-year-old. So definitely got some love for the prequel trilogy.
Awesome, man. That's really great. I've found that everyone on this podcast, for the most part, got started in Star Wars because their family members introduced them to the series, the franchise, rather, of Star Wars. So Star Wars, man, is just something that has been passed down generationally through people from their kids, their grandkids, and it's a really cool thing. Star Wars is something that transcends generations, so that's pretty awesome. And I'd like to point out that when you was talking about taking a lightsaber to the knee, that was pretty funny. I was thinking of Skyrim. I used to be a great adventurer until I took a lightsaber to the knee.
Also big into Elder Scrolls, so if we ever want to go that way, I'm ready.
Oh, yes. We're all big dorks here on Dork Wars, the podcast. It is not just about Star Wars. We're into everything. Right. So this is going to be a spoiler-free speculation of the era of the High Republic. So the High Republic books are taking place 200 years approximately before Episode 1, Phantom Menace. So this is the age where there's a bunch of Jedi. The Jedi Order is at the height of its power. They're able to go all across the galaxy and guard the galaxy against evil. There are apparently no Sith, at least not yet, at the beginning of this series, from what we understand. But we could see that change. And I think that would actually be pretty cool if we could see some of that. I'll get into that in the later part of this podcast. But they're releasing adult books, young adult books, kids books, and comic books. And I'm just going to go over a few of these release dates real quick. If this is where you get your Star Wars news from, this will be beneficial to you. So, Light of the Jedi. That one came out January 5th. So this past Tuesday. It's an adult book. It's for those of us who are over 18. Not that it's got any explicit material or anything, but the writing and the ideas, I'm assuming, are for adults. Test of Courage also came out January 5th. That is like what Disney is calling a mid-grade book, so I'm guessing middle school age kids, maybe young teens. The Great Jedi Rescue, that is a kids book. And that seems to be for not quite middle school age, I guess elementary school age kids. Then the High Republic comic series by Marvel, that started on January the 6th. So that's 4 That's 4 pieces of media that came out in 2 days for this High Republic series. Into the Dark, that's going to be a young adult book that comes out on February the 2nd. The High Republic Adventures, which is another comic book series, will be launching on February 21st. Race to Crash Point, that's going to be another mid-grade, middle school age book that comes out June the 29th. The Rising Storm, which is an adult book, will be coming out on July 6th. And Out of Shadows will be coming out on July 27th, and that is a young adult book. So there is a lot of material that's coming out on this era. So we can kind of speculate that there's going to be a lot happening that has effects that are that go throughout the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and maybe even the sequel trilogy. I've read a bunch of things where this series impacts the sequel trilogy. It has things about Count Dooku, supposedly, or connections to Count Dooku, from what I've read. I don't know all that for sure. Like I said, this is a speculation video. But it seems to be an awesome set of books and comics that are going to really increase our knowledge of what the Republic was before the prequel trilogy. So anyone have any thoughts just out of the gate?
I mean, I'll go ahead and kick it off. Not going to get into any spoilers for the book. So far, I'm reading into the Light of the Jedi. Dear Lord, I can't even remember the book's name. Light of the Jedi. Fantastic read. I've really enjoyed it. It's different. I've never actually read one of Charles Soule's books before. He's the author. And I really like it. One thing I will say is that it's coming from a bunch of point of views from characters. And I've really enjoyed that because it gives, a unique perspective, a ton of unique perspectives even, about the galaxy, about the Jedi, about all types of things that are happening. And so one thing I'm really excited for in this High Republic era is getting these ideas and ideologies. Learning more about the Force, I think, is something that could really happen. We know that the Force is amazing. It's in all living things. It connects all living things. But we've never really gotten deep down into, what exactly is the limits of the Force. There have to be limits at some point, So it's kind of like learning more about the Force would be something that I'm really interested in seeing if they could do. And during the High Republic era, when there's, the most Jedi there ever are and no Sith, I think it could be a real possibility for them to really explore the Force more. And also another thing with that is exploring more of the Jedi. We get a little bit of that in the prequels, but really we don't really know that much about the Jedi Order other than there's a Grand Master, there's a Jedi Council of Masters, there's 3 different levels, basically Padawan, Knight, and Master. And so other than that, we don't really know much about the Jedi Order. And at the height of the Jedi Order, like the High Republic is, I think it'd be a really cool thing to see if, how the Jedi set up. We'll learn more about them and their ways and how they deal with failure other than, just crumbling and falling to pieces and no longer existing.
Right, that's going to be pretty cool. If we look at the Clone Wars series, I do think we get a good look at the Jedi Order and how it operates in a time of peril, in a time of war. But this will be kind of a look into the old Jedi Order. What were they when they were just the Guardians of Peace in the galaxy? What did that look like? What was the hierarchy? What kind of missions did they go on? If there was no Sith, like what kind of evil things did they conquer in the universe, or in the galaxy rather? And that's going to be a pretty cool subject for them to touch on, I think.
Yeah, I agree, Blake. And like you said, like this period is the golden age of the Republic, right? And so there's no Sith right now that we know about. So yeah, the Jedi's they have a reputation of being the guardians of peace and justice, and still hopeful. So I'm excited to see them their development, kind of like what Grant was saying, and to see how the Jedi development and what kind of powers do they have, and even their fears, like what do the Jedi fear, and just the overall history of them, because the prequels and the original trilogy and all that, they don't really give us much info on the Jedi history, just a little bit. And also I like to see a young Yoda, and I'm sure he's there because he's lived a million years.
Oh yeah, that's something I had wrote down. Younger Yoda. He's not young Yoda. And, with Grogu at 50 years old, Grogu's still an infant. So I'm assuming that the species that Yoda and Grogu are probably mirrors that of a human, but it takes them longer to develop. So I'm thinking Yoda's probably like later middle-aged Yoda. But he's going to be nice and spry and ready for some lightsaber battles. I can't wait for that. That's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, some stuff that's public knowledge already about it that they released in a hierarchy list, tier list of Jedi that were going to be introduced in this Phase 1 is what they're calling it for the High Republic era. We actually saw that Yoda's are at this point, 200 years before the Phantom Menace, is already a Grand Master of the Jedi. I'm not going to get too much deeper into that, but I know they mention him in the book. I will go ahead and say that he is mentioned at least. I'm not going to speak of what capacity, but he is mentioned. I'm really excited to see Yoda. I know they're actually doing, it may be in one of the comic series or it may be one of the books specifically about Yoda during this time. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And also, another thing is we find out something already that we didn't know about the Jedi Order. There can be more than one Grand Master at a time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in that chart that I mentioned that they released earlier, there's actually 2 other Grand Masters at this time, and Yoda actually is not the oldest Grand Master during this period. There's someone who's older than him that is a Grand Master as well.
So what this tells me is that Grand Master is not a rank held by the leader of the Jedi. It is probably a rank just higher than Master, where someone is so powerful in the Force that they have the rank of Grand Master. So for there to be more than one, that means that the Grand Master or a Grand Master is not necessarily one who leads the Jedi as like their official leader. I'm sure that those 3 probably are like a small council in themselves and pretty much head up the Jedi.
Speaking of the council, oh, sorry, Grant, but yeah, speaking of the council, I'm curious to see what kind of relationship like the Jedi Council has with like the Senate, and I'm sure it was a lot different than the prequels.
Yeah, I mean, going off of that, I would actually like to see the Senate and the Republic and what's supposed to be how it's supposed to work. If I went back and recently watched the Phantom Menace, and one of the things Grand Master Palpatine says, I'm calling Grand Master because you know who he is. Anyway, Grand Master Palpatine says the Republic isn't what it once was. The Senate is, full of bureaucrats. It's corrupt. So during this time, theoretically, it isn't corrupt. It isn't full of bureaucrats. And so I'm interested in seeing how the Republic worked before, all the bureaucracy, all the, intentions of, out for themselves rather than being together. One thing that is, I'm sure you pick up very quickly in the book, is that there's a big thing of unity in the Republic, which is something I'm really excited to read about and see. And we know where it goes, but it's kind of going to be interesting seeing how it gets there. And I think that's something that they could easily explore, is how the Republic became what it became and ended up being the Empire.
I'm reading the synopsis of Light of the Jedi real quick, and one line it says that it says that a single mistake could cost billions of lives. I'm like, what in the world could be going on in the old Republic, or in the High Republic era, that would cost billions of lives? Later there's Death Stars that blow up planets and things like that, but it's intriguing to think there could possibly be a huge event where billions of lives were lost.
Well, this could be one of 2 things that I think, anyways. This could be, one, an evil that is not the Sith. So the Sith can't be the only evil in the galaxy. I mean, there's tons of evil on Earth, right? There's tons of people who do bad things, tons of different terrorist groups and groups of people that are not good people. Imagine that over an entire galaxy of people. So the Sith can't be the only ones up to no good. Or this is the beginnings of the Sith, the beginnings of the rise of the Sith in the Republic. So we know in the prequel trilogies, especially Episode 1, they talk of there's a new Sith. Oh my gosh, we hadn't seen Siths in 1,000 years. So that's telling me that in this series, we are probably going to see a rise in the Sith somewhere, whether it's from beginning to end or maybe it's on the tail end of this. I don't know, but the Sith have to rise at some point.
Yeah, and I think that's where the show that takes place during the High Republic, at the end of it, the Acolyte's going to really come in. I think we'll see stirrings of the Sith beforehand that may tie into it, but I think the show, The Acolyte, is going to be a big thing about bringing on the Sith. And just going in and getting into some theology and some lore about it. If we look at the Rebels TV series, I'm not trying to get into detail, but I know everyone in this podcast has now seen this at this point. When they go to Malachor and Ezra, Ahsoka, and Kanan are at the Sith Temple, there's a ton of Sith there. They're not following the rule of two. So I'm thinking that maybe the Sith, the Sith Empire as it was beforehand, more than likely, kind of moved to a rule of two after that big clash, after that big fall. And maybe the Sith is still there. It's just the Jedi don't realize it's there because they're now following the rule of two and not the giant empire that they're used to fighting before the High Republic era.
That's a good thought.
I really like that train of thought. I like that. That's definitely something that I would love to watch.
Yeah, I mean, because you think about it, Palpatine had to learn from Darth Plagueis, which means Darth Plagueis had to learn from somebody. And so, I mean, it isn't just like, we sit there and we think, oh, it's the rule of two, rule of two, rule of two, because that's just what we're used to with the Skywalker Saga. But in reality, it wasn't always the rule of two. It was a huge group, an empire of literally Sith Lords. And so it was just kind of like going off of that. And then, it has to continue, but they may think there's no Sith because they were used to fighting the big empire and not the rule of two that maybe someone, I believe in some books, it's Darth Bane or something like that, came up with the rule of two after the fall of the Sith Empire. And I'm not sure if that still stands in the current canon or not, but I believe it does. I'm not too certain on that, though.
Yes, Bane was a big character in the old expanded universe, and he was the one who established the rule of two once the Sith Empire fell in that continuity, like Grant was saying. So maybe they're trying to bring Bane into canon, maybe not in person, but maybe by name drop or something like that. And I think what we're seeing here is all of this media, all of these books and comics that they're coming out with, it is a massive amount of media, of content about this era. So something in this era is going to be super, super important. Maybe multiple things in this era are going to be super, super important. But it looks like that it's all going to culminate and kind of come to a head in the Acolyte. And that's what I'm thinking. From what we've heard, the Acolyte takes place at the end of this High Republic era. So it looks like all these books, all of these comics, all the content that's coming out is going to directly funnel into this show. And I think that's where it's going to kind of lead up to. This is all kind of like a prequel, if you will, to the Acolyte. And that's where we're going to see like the meat of what Disney and Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, what they're trying to get across to us is going to be in the Acolyte.
Hey Blake, so I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but are any of these books like tied together in a series, or are these media sort of independent and they just kind of all take place during the same time?
From what I've read, I don't know if there's a certain order you have to read these in. I would read these in the order that they came out, just to make sure we get what we need to get from each one. It seems, if you're going to read the series, I would read it as it came out. So all that stuff that came out on January 5th, it probably does not matter which one you read. I'm thinking like the younger kids books and stuff probably do not have a big impact on the lore or the overarching story of the High Republic era. That's probably just a speculation, but I wouldn't think the younger kids books would have a huge amount of the big plot that we're trying to get. I'm thinking these adult and young adult books will probably have a lot of that content.
There are, with all of everything that's being released up through February, at least, I know for certain, they're all independent stories that can be read independently, but they do all build off of each other and affect each other. In fact, the Marvel comic that came out on January the 6th takes place after Light of the Jedi. So don't read the first comic before you're reading Light of the Jedi. Just go ahead and put that out there, because you'll see characters from Light of the Jedi in there, and they've already done things, and they talk about events that happened during that book. Luckily, I was already far enough in the book to when I opened the comic, I could realize that and could stop. But there is something that's certainly to take in consideration. But there is a sequel book coming out to Light of the Jedi, a direct sequel to it later on. I believe it's in June or July. But anyway, Dietrich, what's your thoughts on the High Republic era? What do you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think you guys have kind of touched on the two major things I want to see. One in which is kind of the machinations of what the Sith are doing behind the scenes at this point, because at least by old canon, if you look at the what was it, the Darth Plagueis novels, we get a lot of kind of background on what Plagueis has been doing and his former masters and I think his other apprentices before Palpatine comes around. And I would like to see a little more of a canon version of that. Maybe, whoever came before, because we're going how many hundreds of years before now?
It goes from 200 to 50.
Yeah, so what is probably several generations of Sith now, right? So we're going to see what they're doing. If they're there, and again, they could change the canon, so they might not be there. But I think it'd be interesting to see what the Sith are doing in the shadows. And then the second thing, kind of going along with that actually, is the fact that how do we follow up having villains that can use the Force? What's going to be an actual threat to Jedi, arguably even stronger than we see them in the prequels, because it's implied in the prequels they've kind of been waning for a little while now and not really, straying from the path or whatever. So how do we give good rivals to the Jedi? And Grievous comes to mind when I think of that, because his people, at least I think his backstory, I'm not sure if it's canon or not anymore, but his backstory was that basically the Republic had betrayed his group of people, and so he kind of hated the Jedi for it, and that's why he was more willing to succumb to the necessary altercations and changing of his limbs from mechanical ones to go after the Jedi. So that would be a good example, but I would love to see more of other factions that are slowly, getting into conflict with the Jedi or the Republic as a whole.
I've actually given that some thoughts because I'm like, all right, so we know the Sith, while we know by the time of the prequel era, they know there's a rule of two going on because Yoda makes mention of it, always two there are, no more, no less. So we know eventually they're going to figure out about this rule of two, assuming that they don't realize that it's that now and during the High Republic era. But I was thinking about that, who could be the true threat to the Republic, to the Jedi during this time, and I came to two possibilities that I think are really strong and could be interesting. So one that's already in the canon that I would love to see is we could see the Chiss Ascendancy show up. We know by the time Rebels comes out, Thrawn's there, and the Chiss, people know who the Chiss are, especially if you read the Thrawn book that came out that's takes place before Rebels takes place. You find out that people know about the Chiss Ascendancy. People hear stories and rumors about them. So those stories and rumors had to come from somewhere. They're known as great warriors, very difficult to kill. They're very strong, very smart, very tactical. So I could definitely see the Chiss Ascendancy causing some issues here for the Republic during that time, since it's already in canon. But if we're looking at possibilities with the expanded universe, something that can easily come to mind, at least to me, the Yuuzhan Vong. They could reintroduce them during this period rather than the post Return of the Jedi, and it could be very interesting because they gave the Republic, the New Republic, the Jedi, and even the Empire problems after Return of the Jedi in the books, and that's why the New Republic and the Empire actually ended up, combining and saying, hey, let's put our differences aside. This is a bigger issue. And so I could definitely see them introducing them or other beings like them that are, aren't part of the Force.
Yeah, that's going to go on my list of things I don't want to see. I never was super inclined for the Vong. I always felt like it was a little more Star Trek than Star Wars. But they got to be different somehow, right? So.
Yeah, it really did have a very, Borg kind of feel, the Yuuzhan Vong did, because what they would do is take worlds and terraform those worlds to meet their needs. So it was really like a kind of Borg assimilation process that the Yuuzhan Vong did, and it felt very Star Trekky. But I don't know. The Mandalorians have a historic conflict with the Jedi at some point, and it's even in the new canon we hear about it that the Jedi and the Mandalorians have some kind of problem. They don't get along very well. So maybe we'll see some of that in this High Republic era. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think one of the original Mandalorians, wasn't he the first one to wield the dark saber?
Yes, he was the first and only Mandalorian Jedi there ever was. So I mean, that's something we could see is the history of the Darksaber, and maybe see that Mandalorian in this Jedi Order during the High Republic would be really cool.
Yeah, there is just a lot of content that we can put into this High Republic, and the sheer volume of material that they're coming out with, we could see all of this happen. I'm excited to see what's going to happen, especially who's going to come against the Jedi, like Diedrich was talking about and Grant was talking about. You know, is it going to be the Chiss? Is it going to be the Mandalorians? Is it going to be a new species we've never heard of, or a group of people we've never heard of from the outer, from the unknown regions, possibly? Who knows? It's pretty exciting to think about.
I'm about to say, without getting too far into the book, they do introduce a group, which they made it very public. They didn't try to hide it. A group of pirates, basically, is who they're fighting at the start anyway. Where that goes and what that means and why they're actually fighting them, I'm not getting into because that's important for storyline, so I'm not going to do spoilers, but they are fighting them. So there is a group that's already there impacting them at the beginning, but seeing where it goes in the future, because, I mean, the pirates, they're pirates. They're not going to stick around. They're not going to trust each other. They're going to stab each other in the back and try to take everything they can. I mean, that's just, it's pirates.
So you're telling me Jack Sparrow is gliding across the galaxy on the Black Pearl and swashbuckling planets?
Yes, I mean, I would love to see Jack Sparrow in Star Wars. Give that man a lightsaber as a cutlass, and that would just be funny.
It's got to be the best space pirate I've ever seen.
I can feel the Force. Why is all the Force gone?
Blake, have you anything that you really want to see in this High Republic? Anything specific? Like, do you want to see any video games come out? Any marketing materials? That's something I was thinking about was, could we see, new games coming through here, kind of like Knights of the Old Republic? Maybe we see Knights of the High Republic type of deal, and give us some more, interaction with the story in different mediums than just books and TV series.
I'll tell you what, that's very interesting. Video games are something that goes along with Star Wars, especially since like the Nintendo 64 days. You got Pod Racer that came out. You have Shadows of the Empire, which is an incredible game for the time when it came out. And then you have, what's the game we all like to play?
Battlefront.
Oh, Battlefront. Battlefronts 1 and 2. They came out on the original, on PlayStation 2, rather. And then they came out again on PlayStation 4, reformatted, totally different games. And there's some I'm leaving out. Knights of the Old Republic's a big one. So games have kind of been an integral part of the Star Wars universe. I don't know that any really tied in from a news story aspect or canon aspect, but that's something we could see, and we could see some stories about these High Republic Jedi. That would be neat. That'd be really cool. Maybe a massive multiplayer online game. I know they've already got the Knights of the Old Republic MMO, but maybe they can launch a new one. Maybe we can get some good RPGs out of it, some good battle games like Battlefront. The possibilities are really endless with this era, and I think that's what we're trying to get across in our podcast here today, in our episode, is that the possibilities are endless, and everything we've talked about can and probably will be a part of this series, and even things we haven't talked about. I'm sure there's stuff we haven't even touched on that we're going to see brought out among all these books, and maybe it'd be cool to see video games as well.
Yeah, I think video games is a good medium. Give people control over, like, everyone loves Knights of the Old Republic, or not everyone, but most Star Wars fans love Knights of the Old Republic just because, your decisions made an impact on what happened in the story. You could be a light side, you could be a part of the dark side. It was up to you. And so I think that's something that I personally would love to see is another KOTOR type game. And to go back to where you're saying about games introducing into the canon, and actually being canonized, the story to Battlefront 2 is actually canon. The new Battlefront 2 on PS4. So so it's already precedent that could be part of the canon. So I mean, that's just another medium for them to put out. And me as a consumer, as a gamer, I would love that. Andrew, Wesley, anyone else have any thoughts about the video game aspect and anything you could see that would be amazing as a video game?
A couple of new ones that came out. Also, Star Wars, what is it called? Fallen Order. That came out last
yes, Fallen Order.
2019, yeah.
True, that is canon as well.
Yeah.
And then I just installed Star Wars Squadrons today, actually. That's more like the TIE Fighter and X-Wing flying one, so it's pretty cool.
I'm not really a fan of the controls of that game, but I just recently reinstalled Star Wars The Old Republic.
Yes, I did as well.
I kind of went head first into that game, and it kind of So I really want, this is going to be a little bit of a deep cut, but there's a game that used to be called Marvel Heroes Omega, and it's an action RPG, pretty much like Diablo.
Yeah.
I would love to see that in the Star Wars universe. I think that would be absolutely amazing. In Marvel Heroes Omega, there were like 120 characters. You could do the same thing with Star Wars. You could literally play as any character that you wanted to, although it wouldn't be your normal action gameplay where you're swinging a lightsaber. You would just be clicking buttons, but I think it would still be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big gap with Star Wars games in general. I mean, the last one that came out was Squadrons, and before that it was Battlefront 2. And Battlefront 2 has been discontinued for live service, so the only thing we're getting new content-wise is Squadrons. So, I mean, you're launching this new era. You're trying to bring in as many Star Wars fans as you can. You're trying to get them distracted from, the trilogy of the sequels, because people don't want to think about that. They want to think about what's new, what's this great Star Wars. And this is a good possibility for them to explore with games. I mean, there's no real constraints on it. They can do basically anything they want in the era. I mean, there's nothing really stopping them other than, getting approval from the storyboard for the era. But, I mean, it's just an open possibility, and I think that they should really capitalize on it because they're trying to reach as many people as they can, and video games is a good way to do that.
So, no loot boxes, no EA loot boxes. That's all I ask.
Yeah, I would like to get away from that. I like to see them go with another developer, and they may be waiting just to get out of the EA licensing thing for Star Wars games. So that may be something they're doing. I'm not sure, but I mean, if you think about it, just not the High Republic, but there's no Mandalorian content in a video game either.
All right, guys. Well, this has been a pretty productive conversation about the High Republic, this era before the prequels, before anything we've seen in the Disney canon. And I'm, for one, am pretty excited to see where it goes, what kind of new revelations about the Force, about the Jedi, about the Fall of the Jedi era of the Republic. It's going to be really cool. So that's all the time we have today for Dork Wars, the podcast. And we want to thank everybody for the support that you've given us over our past 2 episodes. We've seen some pretty good numbers, some pretty good subscriber numbers. We're excited and we're happy to bring you all of the Star Wars news and content and discussion, debate, laughs. We're here for it. And we hope that you join us every week for this. So thank you very much, and may the Force be with you.
Thank you for supporting Dork Wars, the podcast. You can check us out on Facebook.com/Dork Wars, the podcast. And if you would like to join in on the discussion or maybe suggest topics for us to discuss, please do so by joining our Discord community or sending us an email at dorkwarspodcast@gmail.com. This has been a
Right at my reading the paired gears
production.